This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.
Welcome to What's News Dunedin, brought to you by Hazur Kebab, the radio show that spawned from the 21 plus strong local Oti Poti Dunedin What's News Dunedin Facebook page. The group that's been putting the social back into social media since 2020 with respectful adult debate and a sense of humour. I'm your host, Richard Nice. On today's show, we talked to our wonderful guest, Alan Somerville, ORC councillor, who will be telling us a bit more about themselves and what they do, as well as help us to look back at the posts that have generated the most interactions over the past 7 days on the What's News Dunedin Facebook group. Those posts this week are the measles outbreak and the vaccination concerns and issues that we seem to be having in this country. The announcement from central government of a rates cap for local government of between 2 and 4%, and also the announcement of tourist trains between Christchurch and Invergiggle, which is very interesting. Alan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks very much, Richard.
Good to have you here, mate. And what a strange day we're having. We're having like gale force winds and blistering heat. I think it said 30 degrees.
Something like that. I tell you what, I put my washing out this morning and I got it in perfectly dry at 11:15. You don't do that very often in Dunedin.
You don't. Since the last time you were on the show, we've incorporated a pun of the week, I think, so since the last time you were here. So we have a pun of the week on a Monday, and basically Pun Day Monday brings our best dad jokes, and then we bring it to the show on a Friday to see if the joke jumps off the page and makes people laugh as much as it does on the group. And the only gauge for this is how many laugh reacts it gets. So the sooner you're in during the day, I think, the quicker you get your joke up, right, the more chance you've got of accumulating enough jokes, enough reactions to get on the show. Anyway, another one from Max Reed. Max Reed is a regular. He does a fantastic job of bringing his puns on a weekly basis, but this is one of his. So, pun of the week. A friend works at Bed Bath & Beyond. He's just released a Christmas single, Do They Know It's Christmas? It's a cover.
Do you want me to laugh at that?
You don't have to laugh, mate. I mean, but at the same time, you can if you want to. It's like, it's one of those play on words,
I'll thank Max next time I see him.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I'm sure he listens to the shows just to hear his own jokes. Probably, and then you can laugh at them, and then that way, because someone else is telling them. It's like, he doesn't have to worry about whether, laughing at your own jokes is rude, isn't it? So he can do that. So now, because you're a returning guest, you've also answered our 3 pop questions before, right? Even if you can't remember them, which we were talking about before the show, which is absolutely fine. I can barely remember them, and I read them out every single week. So you get 3 new ones, different ones. So we have returning guest pop questions. So first pop question for the returning guest, right? So toilet paper. When you're hanging toilet paper on the holder, does the paper hang over and closest to you as you're sitting on the throne, or does it hang over closest to the wall, so furthest away from you?
It's good to know you cover the really important issues here.
Oh, absolutely, I do. Yeah.
I'd go for over nearest to me, away from the wall.
That is the right answer. So there's always one question on my show where you can get wrong. Oh. That was it, and you haven't. So
that was lucky.
Everything else is easy from this point forward. So, second question: who is your favourite Spice Girl?
The honest answer, I do not have one. And would be reluctant to choose for risk of offending either someone or a whole lot of someone's out there with a different one.
Oh, well, see, for me, it's always been Jerry. I don't know, Ginger Spice, got no idea why. It's just she's my favourite. So I'm not that there's anything wrong with the rest of them, but if I had to pick one, and I do, it's going to be Jerry.
Right, so I have to abstain on that one.
You're more than welcome to abstain. Now, the third question is our thinker for the week, and this one is: would you rather have a house infested with rats or infested with bed bugs?
I think you'd have to go for the rats there. Not that would be on top of my choices for the type of house I lived in, but at least you can see them.
See, I'm the opposite. I'm mousophobic, right? So rats and mice scared the bejesus out of me, right? Absolutely are my irrational fear that makes me like scream. If I see a mouse, I'm up on the bench, I'm screaming, I'm scared. So I'd take the bed bugs. I'd take itchy invisible bed bugs over rats.
Yeah, well, I help look after a trapline in the town built with City Sanctuary, so I'm getting used to seeing mainly dead rats.
Yes,
but I sort of know how to deal with them. Whereas bed bugs, oh man, do you ever get rid of them?
You got to tumble dry a lot of your washing.
Right.
Yeah, because the heat gets them. So that's one thing. I've had bed bugs. I'm pleased to say, but I'm aware that actually if you wash these stuff, it's not just washing. Washing doesn't do it. You have to actually like tumble dry your stuff at a high heat as well in order to get them out your linen and your stuff.
Yeah. Otherwise, I remember reading somewhere someone saying you just end up with clean bed bugs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's quite. I find it interesting for things like you can literally put like these insects would say they are like small ones through a complete wash cycle, and they just kind of dust themselves at the end of it and go. Thanks, I'm clean now. I'll get back to annoying you like I was before.
Yes, they're pretty hardy, some of those wee bugs.
Yeah, and I'd imagine cockroaches would be the same. They'd get in there and just go, that's all right. I'm all right with that. So anyway, that's the important stuff done, mate. So from this point on, we just get on and talk about other stuff like less serious stuff like the news. Now, the first topic of the week, measles outbreak that we're having in New Zealand currently, something like 29 cases, which doesn't sound like a lot, but is, like in my mind, that is, because measles is this is the thing for me. Measles is one of those diseases that I had as a child. I had the lot. I had measles, mumps, and German measles, rubella as they call it, and I remember it. It was not fun. Like they went through our whole family because there was 4 of us kids, and I remember being in the measles chair, which meant that we had to sit in one corner, like kind of trying to be away from everyone else because actually, we were trying not to infect the rest of the family. It didn't bloody work, to be fair. And we've had the fantastic MMR vaccination has come since then, right? Because that wasn't around when I was a kid. And I had it recently. I got a little note from my doctor saying, "Hey." A year or two ago, saying we've got no record of you having an MMR vaccination. Do you want one? It's free. And I went, yeah, totally. I mean, I've had the diseases, but if I can do that and not be a carrier or pass it on to someone else who actually could have some serious complications from it, and I don't mean catching autism like RFK Jr. seems to think, or the strangeness in the Americas that they seem to think that this MMR vaccine causes autism. It absolutely doesn't. But what I find very interesting is the kind of conversation around the vaccination now, especially on top of what we've been through with COVID. There's this kind of reluctance, my body autonomy, and I get that. I've got no issues with body autonomy. But if I can stop someone who is vulnerable, medically vulnerable, from some serious repercussions, because measles is not a nice disease. If you get it in the way measles is intended to kind of get at you, then I feel like I can't. I've got absolute ultimate responsibility to do so.
Yeah, I guess that's the way it is with so many of those vaccinations. I mean, it brings some individual benefit, but if there's high vaccination rates, it also brings benefits for everybody. And MMR, that's what we're missing.
Yeah, and MMR is one of those ones that has literally wiped out disease, right? It literally to the point where it literally effectively had wiped out measles. And now, because of sort of this reticence for some reason, and I don't understand the reason, because the science is quite strong. The science is solid. This vaccination can eliminate this disease, all right? But then we've got people, because of that reticence of doing it, we've actually now seeing things popping up into society, and it's, and I don't know what you do about it, because it's like it's really hard to convince someone that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, it's trying to establish that culture again that was established for a while, because we've seen in recent years too, whooping cough has raised its head again.
Yep.
And maybe we've forgotten, because we haven't had it around for so long, what serious diseases measles and whooping cough actually are, especially for well for young children and older people sometimes too.
Yeah, can you imagine if we started getting polio back? You know, I remember having a polio vaccination on a sugar cube when I was a kid. You know, they were still giving polio vaccine. I don't know if they still do it now. I don't know whether that's included, but I remember the polio vaccination being given like a droplet on a sugar cube. You took the sugar cube, and that's it. You had your polio vaccination.
Yeah.
And you know that's in my lifetime. But we've seen it eradicated. Right? Polio gone. Right in what I consider the modern world, at least. I don't know if I genuinely don't know if it exists in some of the other countries. You know, some of the less the poorer countries, like smallpox. You know, those kind of things. Like, do we really want them back?
We definitely don't. So yes, all best efforts to our public health authorities, our general practices, and parents as well, to please make the most of those vaccinations.
Because I've had people ask me, should I had this when I was a kid. I had measles when I was a child. Should I get a vaccination? And my answer to that is yes. Because at the end of the day, so did I. But the vaccination is actually is free. Yeah, it will be given if you go to your doctors and say, "Can I have I've not had an MMR. Can I have an MMR jab?" It's free. As it rightly should be, because it's so important that those diseases. Mumps is horrible. Mumps is another one. Mumps is absolutely a horrible disease. So and we shouldn't want to kind of go, oh, the body will sort itself out. Some people get some serious. You can be sterile. You can there's a whole load.
There's real serious consequences for all those things. Not for most people, but for
enough people.
For enough people to be something you don't want in your country, in your population.
I think I saw something like 7% of cases can be like very, very serious. And that's 7% too many in my mind. So let's talk about topic number 2, which is the announcement from central government, because they have some wonderful ideas, central government, and I say that tongue-in-cheek with as much sarcasm as I can convey across radio, of a rates cap of inflationary roughly 2 to 4%, right? Now, I'm gobsmacked. I'm gobsmacked. It's totally populist in its approach, in the sense of, people don't like to see the rates going up, right? And I get that. I don't like seeing my rates going up, right? But I have an understanding of what my rates pay for. The trouble is, most people get upset with their rates going up and have absolutely little to no understanding of what their rates actually covers. And to just kind of say, like, as a populist kind of move, we're going to cap the rates, people go, great, that's fantastic. That's exactly what I want. I want to be able, I don't want my rates to go up more than 4% every single year, right?
Yeah. As you say, it's a very sort of appealing idea, but I agree with you. The consequences are not going to be good, because if councils are limited like that, the consequences are likely to be higher charges for things, like you might have to start, well, I won't speculate, but the charges go up, reduced services, or possibly the worst of all, not enough investment in infrastructure. And so if you ask yourself, why are councils in all these troubles around their supplying of water and sewerage services at the moment, it's because over decades they didn't put enough investment into infrastructure.
And they didn't raise the rates high enough because they wanted to keep rates low, because that's what people wanted.
That's right.
And they didn't understand it. And this is the thing for me, because if you earn more money, you pay more tax, right? So as you're earning, you pay as you earn, right? If you earn more money, you pay more tax, right? But you don't actually get any more for that money invariably, right? It just kind of happens. The things that you get are the things that you get. We're seeing actually a decrease of healthcare. We're seeing a decrease of community funding. So actually, I'm paying more tax and I'm getting less. But no one seems to talk about that, right? When I pay more rates, right, effectively I am getting more for the money that I spend, right? Because I am getting that infrastructure spend. I am getting those roads repaired. I am getting the same, my library still stays open from Monday through to Friday for the same hours, right? I'm not having that reduced. If we cap that, then all of that suddenly changes.
Yeah, that's right.
But the other side of it is people don't seem to realise, right? I pay $4,000 plus, right, a year in rates. That gives me my roads, my sewage, my infrastructure, my bus shelters, my parks, my libraries, my swimming pools, and my community funding, my arts gallery, my museum, and it gives me all of that, plus a whole heap of other things that is too long to list, right?
Yeah, yep.
For $4,500 roughly, and that's including my ORC, right?
Pretty good value by the sound of it, Richard.
This is what I'm saying, right? So then compare that, right? Compare that to how much I pay in income tax in a year, right? Which is many, many, many times more. And what do I get for that? Well, I get healthcare, but that's getting harder and harder and harder to access. I still pay for my GP, right? So I'm not getting anything free there. I don't get any dentistry. I don't, so I'm paying. So I'm getting state highways because state highways come out of that, right? I'm getting some ferries, right? Because ferries come out of that.
Well, you will in a few years if you're lucky.
If you're lucky, I will existing ferries. I get public transport to a point, but I'm paying my regional council for part of that, and I'm paying my government for some of that. So what am I getting? Do you know what I'm saying? It's when you compare it, the income tax that I pay is thousands and thousands and thousands, like many, many times my rates. And yet when I earn more money and pay more money, I don't start screaming at the government, what a waste of my income tax.
Local government is really constrained in the methods of funding it's got, and the reliance on rates is a big problem. The other thing the government's missing in this proposal is it's tying that sort of rates range to the consumer price index. Well, but that's not what councils spend their money on. They spend their money on building stuff and digging things and roads, which have gone way, way up more than the consumer price index.
That's the point. If inflation is 3% at the moment, I know for a fact that the cost of building materials has gone up significantly higher than that. So how can you build, let's say your budget is $1 million or $100 million for a year, right? And inflation means that you now need to spend $103 million, right, to achieve exactly the same level, right? But actually, the cost of that infrastructure has now gone up to $120 million, right? So naturally, straight away, I can't just do a 3% increase for inflation. Even if I just add 4%, which is my cap now, I'm still 16% short of where I need to be in order to actually deliver exactly the same as I did last year. So that means I'm now giving you less. But it doesn't matter because your rates didn't go up.
Now, councils they really need to spend money carefully and responsibly.
Of course.
But part of responsible spending is actually spending money when you need to and not saying, we can't afford that, so we won't put in that investment. And that leads to such big problems 10 years down the track, and for the ratepayers 10 years down the track who've got to deal with those problems.
We're not long coming out of a catch-up period in DCC where we've had where previous historically low rates increases have left the current people with this massive problem. We should have had those increases back then and done it when it was cheaper to do it, so we'd have spent less dollars in the first instance. It's always more expensive to spend it in the future because, as we know, the price of everything bloody goes up.
That's right.
We'll talk about council a bit more, but when we talk about in the second half of the show. But also there was the announcement of tourist trains, tourist passenger trains between Christchurch and Invergiggle, which initially sounds like a fantastic thing. But when you look at the prices, it's still very much a tourist trip. $199 from Christchurch to Dunedin takes about 700 hours or something to actually make the journey. Maybe not 700, but takes a long time to make the journey, and that's a one-way trip at $199, right? So it's outside of the financial ability of most people. You and I actually, we've been campaigning for actual proper funded passenger rail between Christchurch and Dunedin for a good while, right? I see you at the same meetings that I'm at, and that would be a third of the cost And that's kind of what we're after. But what I do take from it is that there's clearly a demand for putting people on a train between Christchurch and Invercargill.
Yeah, and you're quite right that there's a big difference between a tourist service, which is at that price, what we're really looking at, and an ongoing commuter service, and that's what it would be that's what we continue to aim for.
It's the Southerner, to replace the Southerner, not what they're calling this, the Mainlander or whatever it is. I like the way they name their routes. Everything's got a name, right? Yeah. So it gets so bloody confused. I just want a train. Call it a train.
Right.
But we do. It would be beneficial, especially with the increase in airfare costs.
That's right. And some people, of course, say, the trains, it's too expensive. Well, I don't agree with that, because it's a matter of choosing where you put your investment. And for the last many decades, government, because it's government who maintains these big transport networks, government has chosen to put its investments into more motorways. Well, they could shift that into a rail network, and then we could have a successful rail network for commuters, passengers throughout the country.
And the bit that I find equally interesting is that they say that, people's argument is, you shouldn't fund passenger rail, you shouldn't fund buses. But actually, we're funding roads. We're subsidising. They go, you're subsidising public transport because you're making it. We're subsidising roads. And actually, the cost per person to subsidise the trains is significantly less than what we do to subsidise roads. And again, it's like the maths stack up.
Yep.
Absolutely stack up in favour of public transport, good, publicly funded public transport. The numbers absolutely make sense.
So we'll have to keep that campaign up, and whenever there's an election, in particular a general election, keep that issue there, and let's see if we can persuade people to vote for parties who say they will properly support public transport and rail transport.
Because the one thing that amazed me the most when I came here, like 15 years ago, is I couldn't get on a train to go somewhere. I can get on a train to see something, if that makes sense. I can jump on a train, do a 5.5 hour round trip to Tyree Gorge and see some sights, but I can't get on a train and go in the Invercargill. And I come from obviously scale, volume and numbers, etc., is very different in the UK. But many countries have I don't know of many countries that don't have a sort of fully functioning passenger rail service of some description. We seem to be one of the very few, because the only passenger rail you've got is kind of in Wellington and some in Auckland, I believe. Yep. And I've never used it.
Yeah, no, that's right. I use the Wellington ones reasonably often. And it will take investment, of course, but that's what investment is about, putting that money in and setting up a better future for the long term.
Yeah, exactly. Because once those rails are down, once those tracks are down, and once you've got the kind of the stations are in place and stuff, it's far easier to just keep it maintained than it is to kind of start it and break into it and start it from scratch. But you've got to bite the bullet at some point and start it from somewhere. Clearly. Yeah. So. Awesome. Here we are putting the world to rights. We're going to talk about you in a little bit, and obviously there's some very significant changes that are potentially afoot for local government. So we're going to spend a bit of time talking about that in a second. But before we do, we're going to get a wonderful word from our super duper sponsor.
Have you checked out Hazur Kebab yet? It's your go-to for a delicious lunch, a tasty dinner, or anything in between. Order online to save time and pick up some delicious, authentic Turkish cuisine in just minutes. HazurKebabCafe.co.nz. Dine in or take away at 906 George Street.
That's where I'm going for tea tonight. Okay. My brother's over from the UK.
Right. Yep.
And one of my brothers. And my daughter, who is an absolute advocate for Hazur Kebab, has just said that we're going for a kebab. So who am I to argue?
Who are you to argue?
Who
Have
am I
a
to
good
argue
dinner.
when the food is as good as it is at the place? So, big announcement over the last little while from, was it Shane Jones? I don't know if it was Shane Jones.
No, not Shane Jones. The Minister for Local Government and the Minister for Infrastructure? So Chris Bishop and Simon Watts.
Right, okay. There's a combo that I don't like in politics. But anyway, big announcement from those guys about the potential abolition as it is, of regional councils. Now, they've been making these murmurings for a little while, kind of saying, shaking up local government, blah, 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 blah. I find it strange because they keep throwing more things onto local government. That seems to be has been the trend for the last couple of years, is to give you more things to do and tell you that you're not doing it properly, and then say you're spending too much money doing it, and then give you a rates cap, and then try and get rid of you, which does seem a very populist kind of methodology for taking control on a central level. I'd rather they did. I wish they would take control of some things, but they don't seem to want to. They just want to seem to blame other people. But they're now saying, potentially, and it's going to consultation. I'll put that in air quotes, so for the people that are watching on the radio, to get rid of regional councils. Now, what I find extremely telling about that is that a couple of your regional councillors are quite happy about that. To people like Councillor Laws and Hillary, your new chairperson Hillary Calvert, who seem to be happy to lose their jobs and happy to lose the responsibility for actually keeping clean air, clean water, clean stuff for everyone, and just kind of abdicate responsibility. Go, oh yes, I told you it was rubbish.
Yeah, there's certainly varied opinions, though there is very widespread agreement that local government could do with some change and could do with some improvement.
I don't disagree based on the issues that you've got in the way that the government has, as they put more burden on you, but giving you less ability to do your job, which that in itself needs to change. But I definitely agree that there are certain things. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah. So perhaps a good place to start is actually to talk about what regional councils do. And once we've establish that, because people I meet, not everyone knows what the regional council does.
Most of the people that I meet, Alan, don't know. Genuinely don't know. And I spend a lot of my time trying to explain it, and I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a while, and then we'll go on to this new proposal from government, see what that might mean. So, look, I'm a Otago regional councillor. I'm just entering my second term, so I've been there for 3 and a bit years, so I have a much better understanding myself of what the regional councils do. So regional councils throughout New Zealand, that's mostly about environmental management. In Otago, we cover the area from the Waitaki River down to the Catlins, Dunedin, and up to Queenstown and Wanaka, and everywhere in between. So it's that whole Otago region. And the things in terms of environmental management, I've got a little list here. One is about clean water in lakes and rivers, and clean air. And so that involves a lot of monitoring and scientific research. For example, last year, it might have been the very end of the year before, at the council, we received a report about the water quality in lakes Whakatipu, Wanaka and Hawea. And that said, on a number of measures, the water quality in those lakes was very good. Now, that was the worst news I'd had for years, because previously that had come in as excellent. So, yes, still those lakes are pretty nice, but they're not quite as good as they were.
So it's actually going worse. It's going backwards.
Yeah, that's right. So what the ORC has done is put in place, there's a working group on this and a whole lot of scientists and whatnot, to try and understand what's going on, what is causing that change, and then once we've worked that out, we may be able to work out what on earth to do about it. And I think most people, in fact everyone I have met, would agree that it's really important we keep those big alpine lakes in a really good state. Well, that's not going to happen if we don't do anything. So that scientific research is actually really necessary. So that's one thing the council does, as well as lots of monitoring on other lakes and rivers throughout Otago to see how clean they are, and there's lots of different sort of measures about that. Along with that, there's a whole lot of compliance monitoring. If an industry wants to discharge some dirty water into the river, they're meeting all their conditions, and a lot of that's around farming too, because with runoff from farms, there's a whole lot of that stuff, fertiliser, animal residues that get into the river, so that needs to be checked on as well as education about good practice. So it's not just about rules, but it's also about giving people advice about how to do things well that does look after the environment. An example of that, something that's recently ORC supporting in Dunedin, is a sort of an adopt a drain program. And that's starting, I think, down the Tomahawk area, and there's some scout groups on board with that, trying to raise awareness of Dunedin residents that what you put into your gutter and your stormwater drain, it is either going to go straight into the harbour or straight into the Kaikarai stream or somewhere like that. So actually you can't just tip anything down there, because that is affecting the quality of the water around us. And so there's those sort of education and community programs we support too. So that's one side of it. There's a few others. One is around, another is around biosecurity and biodiversity. For example, rabbit control. Landowners are responsible for controlling rabbits, but the ORC is the authority to make sure those landowners are doing their job. Things like keeping on top of the wilding conifer problem, which in central Otago is a real risk that those pine trees that have been planted, their seeds blow off into our tussock grassland, and if we're not careful, soon that tussock grassland is all gone. And that's going to require a really big investment to keep on top of that. Those are really important issues for our landscapes there. Natural hazards too, and the big one, of course, is flood protection, because we know it does sometimes rain around here, and it does sometimes rain in the mountains. So it's keeping communities safe by making sure there's good flood protection schemes as well as good flood prediction schemes. And ORC is getting much more information on that, on sort of seeing what weather is coming in order to be able to work out, do we need to alert this community that there's a danger here, or in fact it's all going to be okay. And the recent heavy rain we've had in October in South Otago in particular, generally speaking, our flood protection schemes held up pretty well. And that's really important for the people living there and for the farms that are there too. The ORC also runs the buses, public transport in Queenstown and Dunedin, and are looking at supporting a community-based trial in Oamaru to Palmerston at the moment too. And quite significantly too, the ORC owns Port Otago and received some dividends for that, which benefits everyone and keeps an eye on. The port's an independent organisation, but we sort of keep an overview of that. So all those things, mostly around looking after the environment, are the responsibility of the regional council. The city council, if you live in Dunedin, looks after the local services, roads and rubbish collection and drinking water and your sewage, your libraries and museums, and has other things like community housing to look after the people here as well.
And I get, as a homeowner in Otago, all of those things that you mentioned to me, apart from the bit like last bit about the DCC, I get for less than $500 a year, right? And yet I hear people raging, especially online, and where it's easy to rage, that you're wasting my money, right? I can't buy the latest. I can't buy the latest TV for $500. I can't buy the latest game console for $500. $500 means that I'm walking outside, or less than $500. My ORC bill is something like $400 and something a year. And don't get me wrong, that's significantly gone up since I was here 15 years ago. But I think they were something like $90 when I was here 15 years ago, and it was way too little. I used to see that bill coming and going like, but I've understood since then the reason I can go outside on a sort of like a colder day and not be consumed by smog is because we still like wood fires here, right, is actually because of all the work that's being done on the back of my $500. Yep.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And we know lots of people are really stretched at the moment, and that's difficult to find any money sometimes. But if you don't do that environmental protection, then things really are going to fall apart. Things are going to fall apart. We're not going to have such a nice place to live, and we're not going to have such a healthy place to live, and we're not going to have a place where our farms can operate successfully, because if we have a polluted environment, that puts a limit on everything that can be done. Partly your marketing, because so many of our export products are dependent on being able to say, look at the nice clean environment we're in, but also because if you're operating in a polluted environment, animals and plants are not going to grow as well, and people will get sick. So that environmental spending, it is absolutely vital for our well-being.
It's critical, isn't it? It's absolutely critical. And the other side of it is as well, if you don't do that flood protection, right, then my insurance costs go up, right? Because actually there's more insurance events that are happening throughout the country, and we're getting more and more of those as it stands right now, because actually like those 1 in 100-year events because of climate change and the climate crisis that we're existing in is causing those events to happen more and more frequently. So like, you know, we've had probably 5 1 in 100-year events in the last 10 years, you know, which is crazy when you think about it. But it's you know, if my insurance cost goes up, and they're going up anyway, I mean, that's the whole point. Yeah. Like they're saying, I think one of the biggest markups over the last kind of 5 years has been insurance. You know, the cost of insuring the house that you live in, the cost of insuring the car that you drive, those kind of things. But that could easily go up by more than the cost of my annual figure that I'm paying to the ORC to make sure that that I'm looked after. We take clean air and we take clean water for granted, all right? But it is absolutely, and people need to understand this, it's absolutely a constant battle and fight to maintain those levels of cleanliness, all right? It doesn't just happen because it doesn't just happen. There is an immense amount of work that's involved. And in bringing that and making sure that that's happening every single year, and that we're improving rather than sliding backwards, like that we've got with some of those alpine lakes. Yeah,
no, that's right. It is. It's ongoing and it is constant. And in many places, things are getting better. That we are seeing improvement in water quality in some places. And in terms of air quality, one of the big issues of air quality in Otago is the smoke from wood burners in winter.
Yep.
And it doesn't affect everywhere the same because it depends on your climate and your geography. So the towns of Arrowtown, Cromwell, Mosgiel, Milton, Alex, because of needing that heating, but also because of the climate conditions and the geography there, they are the ones who suffer most. And that has improved with various rules and guidance the ORC has brought in over the last 10 years, but it's still that air quality is such that it is making quite a lot of people sick, and that reduced productivity and the costs on the health system and the costs on those individuals, and we could do better on that as well.
And people don't often see that, like the roll-on costs. People don't give that consideration, and I don't know if it's because we spend our life in that very sort of, almost like an instant news cycle where we only think about the here and now. Certainly, when you see people complaining about rates, it's very much about the here and now, and it's got nothing to do with the. It's hard to convince someone, right? It's very hard to convince someone that by paying the rates that they're paying right now, they're not going to pay more. They're actually paying less rates in the future. All right.
Yeah.
People don't get that because they also see their rates increasing, right? So they kind of go. What they don't realise is that if by doing the work now, it's not costing as much as it would in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. So therefore, it's costing less, right? But it's a very difficult kind of thing to wrap your noggin around sometimes. That actually that investment in the right now, which feels painful to those people, is actually trying to help them in 10 years' time.
So and here's a good example about that. In the Waikato River, and I think it's been found in Taranaki too, there's a new pest has arrived, a freshwater gold clam it's called, and it lives in rivers, comes from East Asia somewhere.
Did it get on? Did it come on the bus?
I don't think a bus. I think probably a boat was involved somewhere down the track. But it gets in the rivers and it just spreads like nothing. And it can be a real problem in terms of taking over from the native plants and animals that live there, and a real problem for the hydro generators when they're having to spend a whole lot of money keeping this clam out of their generation systems. Now, that freshwater gold clam hasn't yet reached the South Island. So, seems to me, would be really worth putting as much investment as we can to keep that out of arriving here, rather than think, oh, we'll wait to get it here. Because once it gets here, there's going to be no stopping it.
Yeah.
And in terms of how do you keep it out, that's really education and monitoring about people bringing things, boats, wetsuits that have been in the North Island. If they're coming to the South Island, let's get them checked very, very carefully before they go into our South Island lakes and rivers. Otherwise, we may find that freshwater gold clams here too. So a relatively small investment, being careful to prevent that clam arriving, as opposed to having to deal with it when it gets here, which will be enormously expensive for lots of different industries.
I'm thinking about having that conversation with Joe Public, right? If you have that conversation with Joe Public right now, they will literally throw their arms up in the air. And I know I could almost see it happening online in the groups that I hang around in. People will just literally lose their marbles over the fact that it's like, A, it's just a clam. B, it's like it's not a problem right now. And I don't know how we educate beyond that because we need to. Like in my mind, we need to, because what people this is the bit, again, coming from the UK, where like the UK, it's a rabies free environment, right? Because it's an island, right? So that's fantastic. But the rabies throughout Europe and the rabies throughout Americas and stuff, you kind of go, Jesus God, I'm glad we don't have to deal with that, But when I come over here, what I couldn't understand when I got here was how the people that already live here seem to have no idea of how vulnerable their ecosystem is, our climate is here, right? And yet we're talking about possums almost daily, right? So possums are an absolutely prime example of what an invasive species can do to our ecosystem, right? So here we are, right in our faces. We've got this problem that we can touch, we can feel, we can see, right? And yet we still seem to have a real basic non-understanding of like what happens if a piece of seaweed comes this way, or that clam does its thing, because I don't get it. I struggle with it because actually we have such a fragile and precariously balanced ecosystem because of the biodiversity we have here, which is unique amongst anywhere else in the world.
Yep.
And we should be doing everything we can to protect it. And people don't seem to understand that that's something that's important.
Yeah, well, just keep talking about it. That's maybe what we can do for now anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about something else in a second. Obviously, entirely linked to what we're talking about. But before we do, I'm just going to get another quick word from our wonderful sponsor.
Have you checked out his kebab yet? It's your go-to for a delicious lunch, a tasty dinner, or anything in between. Order online to save time and pick up some delicious, authentic Turkish cuisine in just minutes. hazardkebabcafe.co.nz. Dine in or take away at 906 George Street.
So I want to talk about the changes that are potentially coming to the regional councils, right? Because it seems very... it seems a little bit staged to me, right? Because it wasn't that long ago you've got Shane Jones calling the ORC the Kremlin. You've then got him calling us demonic egg beaters. No one in the country, maybe no one in the world, understands what Shane Jones means by that. I'm not even sure Shane Jones understands what he means by that. Like, sometimes people open their mouth and the word salad that falls out of it is like, you should like stop, just think. I mean, I say millions of words a day, right? I've never said something as stupid as that. My wife might choose to differ with me, but I don't think, so we get called demonic egg beaters. Makes for some good memes. And then we get the announcement that we're going to get rid of regional councils. And it doesn't actually seem, from what I've seen, a plan of what that ultimately means, other than we get rid of the people that are looking after the really important stuff that you and I have just been talking about for the last half an hour.
It does sound like that, doesn't it?
And this is coming from an Otago Regional Council. So maybe you can expand on that and tell us from where you're sitting, because you were the only person that voted against something the other week. What were you the only person to vote against?
Do you really want to know? I think it was to aim for a 0% rates rise.
That's right.
And
yeah,
my argument was what I've said. Actually, we need to start with not some figure plucked out of the air like 0%, but rather what's the important work that has to be done.
Yeah.
However, it looks as though we can achieve that and do our important work, so that's good. Yeah, the government's come up with this simplifying local government proposal, and though the headlines have been about abolishing regional councils, actually the first step is abolishing regional councillors. So the plan is for a couple of years, the council organisations and the workforce would continue doing all the jobs those regional councils do, as we've talked about, but the councillors, the governance level, would be gone. And that would be replaced instead by they're calling it a Combined Territories Board, which is composed of all the local mayors. So get rid of the elected regional councillors, bring all the local mayors in to undertake that governance work, just to keep an eye on the workings of the council for a couple of years.
Have they spoken to the mayors about that?
Yes, did they ask the mayors? Good question.
Because I had the mayor on the show last week, right? And we had an off-air conversation about it. Like there's only 24 hours in a day, right? And many of those hours are already consumed by their mayoral duties.
Yeah.
Because it goes beyond, like being the mayor goes beyond work. They don't just pitch up to the office at 9 o'clock in the morning, go home at 5, having worked flat out all day long. They've got then evening commitments, weekend commitments. They've literally got, giving out the awards at the recent Otago regional count, ORFM awards, these are all things. So when the hell does any mayor in the country have time to also govern all the amazing things and all the critically important things that we've just been speaking about, and we barely scratched the surface of what's important.
That's right. And the question, did they ask the mayors? The answer is no. And I think there's two problems with saying let's put the mayors in charge, possibly with Crown appointees to help them and maybe even be the majority, but let's not get into that one. One is, yes, have the mayors got the capacity? But secondly, are the mayors actually the right people to do this? Because a mayor's job is to promote and look after their city or their district.
Yep.
It's not actually to take this regional view and work out what's the best for the region. And though I'm sure mayors are very clever and very intelligent and very perceptive in many ways, they've got a different job. And asking them to do this regional job, actually, I don't think is the appropriate thing to do.
It doesn't seem particularly well considered.
No,
it doesn't seem particularly fair. Unless they're going to suddenly give them twice the salary. Because let's face it, right? At the moment, you've got just in the Otago Regional Council, you've got 12 councillors being paid a salary in order to look after Otago Regional Council, right? If you've got a collection of mayors that are now replacing them, there surely needs to be a remuneration package that comes along with that to make it of worth or value to the people that you're asking that from. It just seems like someone had this idea on the back of a cigarette packet and just kind of went, that's, and I do know people that think that the mayoral forum thing is a good idea, but I am genuinely, I've said to them, and these are people I respect very highly. I've said to them, you need to convince me because as I see it right now, I can't wrap my brain around that simply because our mayors are already working 60 plus hours a week.
Yeah.
And to expect another hour's work from someone doing that kind of level of work already, I think is ludicrous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they've got another job too for a couple of years just to oversee the workings of the regional councils. But secondly, over those 2 years, to come up with the new plan for what's the new structure of local government going to be in the region. And so that might be combining councils or creating different ones or separating them off. So that's the thing too. And after 2 years, the idea there would be a plan for another long-term structure for local government in the region.
So you're saying the government is basically is already divesting its interest of actually being responsible and funding things properly, to then ask the local government to actually fix its own problem.
And it would, of course, require government approval. So it's not quite a matter of leaving it to the locals to decide entirely.
So I would like you to go away and fix something for me to my standards that I think that I'm not investing any time in myself.
Yeah, something like that. So, and there could be change. I mean, there are different ways of doing it. And maybe having a regional council isn't the best way. But I think the best way to figure that out is not for government to come and say, here's how to do it, but rather for the people involved, councillors, for communities, to get together and work that out over time. And maybe that can happen. But I think the Combined Territories Board of the Mayors is not the group to oversee that. The current system was set up with regional councils, came into existence in 1989 when there was a big overhaul of local government. And the logic for creating regional councils at that point still exists. And that's all that environmental management we talked about doesn't take account of local council boundaries. In particular, it's about catchments, because river quality, we have to look after the whole river. So the Clutha River, for example, runs through Queenstown Lakes District Council, Central Otago District Council and Clutha District Council. And that's the logic for doing your environmental management at this regional scale. So I think sort of saying, let's just get rid of the regional council, have the local councils doing it, it's not going to look after those environmental things. So I don't think that's a satisfactory solution, but there may be a better way of doing things.
Yeah, but it seems to me that rather than, in my mind, surely you would think of the better way of doing things before you got rid of the people that were already doing it to the best of their ability right now. It just seems cart before horse. It's just like, I've said that I'm going to shake up local government, so therefore I'm going to have to announce a policy right now that does that, regardless of the fact I've got nothing to replace it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, doing away with regional councils, that may be the end result, but we haven't worked that out yet.
No, I think you do. In my mind, you put that work in first, right? Someone in the government, and it goes across multiple governments, because this government might not be in power, fingers crossed. But you never know. It might not be in power in less than 12 months' time. So that they're going to start something that they're expecting the next government to finish. And I think it's been mooted as a thing before from Labour that they obviously regional councils needed to change. So I don't think it's like necessarily just this current government's idea. But it's this current government that's kind of had a knee-jerk reaction to what the outcome looks like. Surely they should be talking bipartisan across all the parties in central government and actually coming up with a solution that is actually satisfactory to all of those central government parties before they. But isn't? Am I just trying to make too much sense?
No. I think that's in fact the most important thing. That let's see if we can make something positive come out of this. And I think having an enduring solution is the most important thing, because the worst thing would be there's a change of government somewhere down the track and that government says, oh no, we're not going to do that, we're going to do something else.
Flip the switch back the other way. You know, like, no, we're keeping regional councils, and then the next government comes in, because we do flip-flop between the red and the blue, like with regularity, you know. So and the general philosophy of either doesn't change massively as on the way through. So we just, you know, so it's like the Polytechnic. Like, who's benefiting from the Polytechnic becoming the Super Polytechnic to going back to being the Polytechnic? Absolutely nobody. But you flip-flopped in between. And I can see this happening with regional councils. And it's just the people, the people at the bottom that will just get literally smashed for almost forever. Yeah,
that's right. It can be so disruptive. So I guess, I think there's three, I've thought about this a bit, and I think there's three really important things in the feedback we give, because yes, consultation's open till the 20th of February, so it's not all set in stone. One is to find this enduring solution, and that means getting some wide cross-party agreement to it, as well as agreement from communities and the people who are involved. That's really important.
We might have to stop you there, Alan. Because actually, we're going to run out of time, mate. Seriously, okay. We've got 55 minutes. We've got at least got 1 point out of you three.
You did.
Really
Excellent.
Appreciate you coming on. Sorry that I had to cut you off, but otherwise I'll get told off. If you just sit there while I round out the show. Thank you. Well, that's a wrap for this week. Thank you for tuning in. I've been Richard Knights, and you've all been wonderful. Remember, if you're looking for robust, respectful adult debate about all things local and further afield, and a welcoming online community doesn't take itself too seriously, come and find What's News Dunedin on Facebook and join our fun. On next week's show, we'll be talking to Hannah Butson from I Lead Dunedin, and look forward to seeing you next Friday at 12 on OAR FM. And if you wanted to listen to the show again, or simply share it with your friends, you can find us on OAR, so you can find the podcast at oar.org.nz, or even on Spotify, YouTube, or your favourite podcast provider.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.